Nothing, I don't really like the word paranormal, but there's nothing inherently paranormal about the idea that life might have arisen elsewhere in the universe and might be visiting us, because it doesn't really need, any new laws of physics or chemistry or anything like that. Now, you could say, well, we don't have viable interstellar travel, and that's true, but we've devised probes that in a few tens of thousands of years will reach the nearest stars. And if a civilization emerged, 100 million years ahead of us and had built similar probes like the Voyager probes and the Pioneer probes with no more technology than we currently possess, then those probes could be here already. So
the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's
Hi, my name is Marta.
My name is Pedro.
And welcome to YOLO Talks, when we talk with really interesting people about awesome topics. Today with us we have Nick Pope. And Nick Pope is a go-to guy when it comes to UFO topics. Also, other unexplained situations, conspiracy theories. He worked in the British government as well, but he will tell us a little bit more about it. And I'm not gonna make this introduction much longer. Hello, Nick.
Hi, it's great to be on the show.
Very great to have you as well. First question I'm gonna ask you is to basically go on and tell us a bit more about you and your background.
Certainly. Well, I was a civilian employee of the British Ministry of Defence, and I worked there for 21 years. And I did, during that time, a number of different postings, but the one that I'm best known for is a job that I had between 1991 and 1994, when my duties included looking at UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, as we tend to call them in government. And my job was basically to see if there was any defense or national security issue that resulted from these sightings. And it was a fascinating job, of course. As you can imagine, I researched and investigated the phenomenon, looked into about 200 or 300 sightings each year. Most of them turned out to be misidentifications, but some of them were genuinely mysterious and very interesting to us, and included cases where these things were seen by military pilots and tracked on radar.
And were you interested before in UFOs or UAPs or all of this world, or was it just something that you were assigned to?
I had no previous interest in this whatsoever. No, as you say, it was just something I was assigned as a government job. So I did it for those 3 years, but then I felt that it was too interesting just to turn my back on. And so even after I was posted to another division, I kept up my interest in a private capacity. Then when I left the Ministry of Defense, I got involved. Actually, they asked me to come back and help with the program to declassify and release a lot of the old UFO files, many of which I'd written. And so my name has been in the public domain for many years. And now a lot of people come to me when they want a sort of inside perspective on this from someone who's looked at it in government, whether that's for a TV news report or a documentary, or sometimes Hollywood movies. They want a bit of sort of inside knowledge about how we handle this subject, what we think, what would be realistic. And so, yeah, I never really managed to walk away from this subject.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier that's like 200 cases a year, right? More or less. Were most of the cases like reported by regular people, like sightings from people, or just for military, or is it like out of those 200 each year, which were really meaningful to look into, or what's the kind of job that you did there? Like, I mean,
the sightings came from everyone. We were a public-facing programs. So we although we did do some classified work, most of what we did was unclassified, and it was never hidden from the public that our office existed and looked at this subject. And in many ways, of course, that could not have been the case, because most of the data that we looked at came from the public. I would say over the years, probably 95% or more of the sightings came from the public. And now there's always an argument about whether, in the United States, for example, at the moment, they are only looking at military sightings. And some people say that that's a good model because it eliminates kind of some people who are well-meaning, but there are some fairly crazy people who attach themselves to this subject too. But other people, even in the intelligence world, say, no, it's a mistake to cut out the public because, as I say, that's where most of your data come from. And therefore, yes, you might want to filter the data in a more meaningful way, but you shouldn't cut it out altogether by not taking the sightings in the first place. So it's a very controversial debate about what to do with the public sightings versus the military ones. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. As I say, we took sightings from everyone. Later, after I left, they began to concentrate exclusively on military cases. And that, as I say, is pretty much what the United States government is doing now. But some people say that's a mistake, and they need to reopen something along the lines of the old Project Blue Book, which was a United States Air Force program that ran in the 50s and the 60s.
Mm-hmm. And is it, correct me if I'm wrong, but my feeling is that UAPs, UFOs, have had a lot of attention in the recent years, especially because, correct me if I'm wrong, but United States have admitted publicly that there are a lot of these strange phenomena, and they don't know what, in most cases, what these objects are, right? So is it really in the latest few years that this phenomena has taken a lot of importance for real, or it has always been there before?
Well, people have always seen strange things in the sky, and you can have a debate about that. Of course, some people say that it goes back to the dawn of time, but it's certainly in modern UFO era is generally acknowledged to have started in 1947 with Kenneth Arnold's famous flying saucer sightings, which gave rise to that term, though it's not used much anymore. And of course, the Roswell incident, whatever people think crashed at Roswell, it's not disputed that something did. So 1947 is generally used as a start point. But yes, you're right. In the last 5.5 years, this subject has really come out of the fringe and into the mainstream. And one reason for that is that in December 2017, the New York Times ran a front page story in which they revealed, firstly, that there had been some US Navy incidents, and we've subsequently, of course, all seen those videos, where pilots were seeing UFOs and tracking them on their forward-looking infrared cameras, which were mounted on the F-18 fighter jets they were flying. And in parallel with that, the New York Times revealed that the Pentagon had a program called ATIP, which stood for Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which, although there's still controversy about exactly what it did and didn't do, even the Department of Defense now admit that it did look to some extent at these UFO sightings. So after the New York Times put it on the front page, the United States Congress got involved. More photos and videos were released, and the US Navy and the Pentagon, of course, confirmed that this was genuine footage. So this isn't like something you find on YouTube or something. This is on US government websites. And since then, we've had 2 reports from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. We've had 1 set of public hearings, again, stemming from congressional interest. NASA is doing a study, and we now have several UFO-related provisions in the new defense bill. So it's now written into the legislation. So absolutely, this subject used to be regarded as sort of fringe conspiracy theory, science fiction, but now it's very much gone mainstream.
Yeah.
Certainly in the US.
But I think previously, like you mentioned Roswell, I was a child when, I saw some videos released from apparently like some aliens that have been caught from that incident or something like that. That was fake video, right? But
that's fake.
Yeah, that's obviously fake. But I mean, like, what I mean is that the pictures, the videos that were used as proof by those times were really, like they're using like just saucers or, it was evident by our modern standards, right? But it seems right now that maybe because of technology, maybe because now, we have reports from military that's, they are saying, okay, there is something weird going on here. That now the subject is really being taken seriously, right? Like, that's kind of
correct. Yes, absolutely. And you're right. I think it's technology that's the key to this. It's not just that we have better radar systems than ever before, including some space tracking radar systems in parallel with standard military and air traffic control radar systems. But we also, of course, have very sophisticated military satellites and civilian ones too, of course, and more of them than ever before. And many of the fast jets that the military fly have very good high quality cameras, including, as I mentioned, forward-looking infrared cameras, which can look at things like heat sources. And then what you can do with all this is, of course, all the people in military intelligence can take all these data and they can start to make assessments, including imagery intelligence, including measurement and signature intelligence, looking at infrared signatures of heat sources and things like that. A lot of this is quite classified. So, of course, I'm only giving an unclassified summary, but the short version is that the experts can do a lot with this, and that's precisely why I think a lot of people in Congress right now are saying we need to take this seriously. And of course, we saw a few weeks ago, we saw this story with the Chinese spy balloon, and that's interesting, but it's a little bit of a diversion in a sense, because we've always known that balloons and drones and other countries seeking to gather intelligence cause a lot of UFO sightings. So in one sense, that was nothing new. What was new about it was that it was such an international news media story. So it's connected with UFOs, but it's not quite the same. It's not even the same organization looking at the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually true. I'm wondering, we talked about technology right now, and what is the percentage of the cases that are actually unexplained? Because I can guess that the majority of them, you can tell that maybe there was a balloon or a drone, but I guess there are some that nobody can explain, right?
Yes. Broadly speaking, it breaks down 80% of these cases can be explained with a high degree of certainty as misidentifications of aircraft lights, weather balloons, satellites, meteors, drones, list goes on. In about 15% of cases, we just don't have enough good information to make a meaningful assessment. I mean, sometimes, for example, when I was doing this job for the British Ministry of Defence, sometimes we'd have people contact us years after a sighting and not even remember the exact date, but maybe they'd seen a television program or a news report and it had jogged their memory, and they said, look, I want to report something. And with the best will in the world, you can't do anything with something like that if you don't know, firstly, if you don't know the exact date and time, but secondly, if you don't get the report within about 24, maybe 48 hours, it's the same as police investigations because the trail goes cold. Radar data is kept for a certain amount of time, but if nothing happens, no air safety issue, no national security issue, then the radar tapes, as it was literally in those days, VHS video cassette tapes, are reused. So the trail goes cold. Witnesses begin to their memories fade and become less accurate. So 15%, we just don't have enough good data. 5% genuinely unknown, of course, doesn't mean any one of those are alien, which is what everyone wants to know, of course. It just means that we did an investigation and we didn't come up with an explanation, but maybe we didn't look quite in the right place or hard enough. Maybe we were lacking one critical detail. Maybe someone inadvertently gave us an incorrect date, or somebody misheard something when they took a call, and you get secondhand information. You were looking in the wrong location. So it doesn't mean any of these unexplained cases are extraterrestrial. But on the other hand, as we always said, neither does it mean that we ruled out that possibility. Unknown just means unknown, nothing more, nothing less.
What do you think would be more worrisome? That is, actually these unexplained low percentage of cases are really aliens, or are really like a technology from Russia or China? What do you think is most worrisome?
Well, I think I'm going to steal the answer, which I think came from Senator Marco Rubio, who's one of the people in Congress taking an interest. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, in one sense, it would be better if this was Russia or China, because at least we could pick up the phone and talk to them. And we've got the hotline. And even at a time when international tensions are high, nobody wants a nuclear war. So you can, like I say, you can always pick up the hotline and talk. But if we were dealing with something genuinely extraterrestrial, we are in completely unknown territory. We'd hope they were coming here like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or E.T., but for all we knew, they would be coming here like War of the Worlds or Independence Day.
Yeah. But I mean, what's your gut feeling? Because you've been inside, you are in contact with a lot of people that in this world of UAPs, UFOs. I mean, what's the general feeling? That is it technology from other countries, or is it like, is the feeling that, this thing is so fucking strange that, like it has to be alien, this kind of low cases?
It could be both. I mean, the answers are not mutually exclusive. And indeed, in the first assessment that we got on this from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, so this was a US intelligence report drawing together all the data and all the assessments from the 18 different parts of the US intelligence community. They said in that first, it was a 9-page unclassified version that was released to the public. They said, look, there is not going to be one single answer to this. Chances are there are a lot of different things going on. So the answer to your question is that some of this could be Russia and China. Some of it could be extraterrestrial. Some of it could be our own technology. Our own, I mean, United States.
Could you give
I mean, very often.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
Very often in government, you have a situation where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, particularly with very highly classified, deeply compartmentalized subjects like this.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask, just to give a little background to the audience, when we say that military reports are really hard to explain, can you give us an example for mundane people like me to understand why it's so physically impossible to explain the movements of these UAPs, for instance, like one case that comes to mind or something?
Well, I just mentioned those US Navy videos. There are 3 of them that you can view on on the Department of Defense website. And as I say, they've confirmed that this is genuine footage. And even the Pentagon says they still don't know what this is. And so you've got to figure that the US Department of Defense is probably the biggest organization of its kind in the world. They have access not just to military intelligence, but all the intelligence from other parts of the intelligence community, whether it's CIA, whether it's the National Security Agency, all those 18 parts. And if they collectively have looked at this and still have not been able to explain it, then I think that is very telling. And of course, it's not just it's not just looking at this. It's the fact that it has been analyzed, and it's the speeds, the maneuvers, and the sudden accelerations that these things give. And two of the three videos have soundtrack to them, and I don't know if you've seen them or the people watching.
Yes, I've seen them.
Yeah.
Well, if you one of the things that I think is most interesting about that is that the two of the three of them have soundtracks, and when you listen to those pilots, you got to figure that these are the so-called top guns. Those U.S. Navy pilots are really elite pilots. You can hear how excited, shocked they are. Well, these people don't. It takes a lot to impress them. Yeah. They see things. They see aircraft, missiles, and drones traveling at thousands of miles a day every day of their working lives. It's what they do. So when they get excited, I think we should get excited.
But that's the thing. Like, let's suppose they are seeing things that do not make sense from the physical point of view. They do, because we have that footage, right? But then, if it was something from the Earth, from Russia, China, is it really possible to hide that kind of secret technology? Because, like during the Second World War, both fronts could, they had the spies on every side, and they kind of information was leaked, right? But it seems like no one really has any kind of idea of what this could be, right? So again, it points again to the alien kind of theory, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. And there are plenty of people. I mean, look, the situation right now in the US government, the military, and the intelligence community is that there are different views. And I've spoken to a number of people who have been on the inside of these programs in the US, not just the UK. And as I say, the situation right now is that they don't know. One faction thinks that it is clearly all terrestrial technology. Whether it's the United States or whether it's an adversary or maybe even non-governmental organizations. People talk about Elon Musk and he's got his own space program, of course. Is it possible that some of these space entrepreneurs have developed a capability that they're not sharing with government? Absolutely. If you look at the technology that SpaceX possesses, you'd probably say it was more advanced than NASA, and that's a fair point. So, but conversely, there is a faction in the US government who thinks that some of this might be extraterrestrial. So, and these two factions are having a bit of a battle with each other at the moment for control of the narrative on this, and it's quite adversarial. If you look at some of the on background briefings that have been given to the media, it's clear there are two factions in US government on this. There's a skeptic faction and there's a believer faction. So, and all this is literally playing itself out now with new developments, it seems, almost every week.
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to my mind is that also what you mentioned, that sometimes we don't know what people might be literally hiding in the garages. Maybe there are some people that actually are building technology that is kind of further ahead and not necessarily communicating that to the government. But also during the war, like Enigma didn't come out straight away, right? It was a secret for a long time. And then after years only, it was found out that, that was one of the reasons why the war turned out the way it turned out.
So absolutely, secrets can be kept. Enigma is a very good example because most people falsely believe that it was revealed the moment the war ended in 1945, but it wasn't, because a lot of South American embassies continued to use Enigma machines throughout the 50s and the 60s. And I don't have the exact date, but I believe it was late 60s, early 70s, before it was revealed, before the full story that we'd broken the codes emerged. And secrets can be kept. The United States government had thousands and thousands of people working on the atomic bomb program. And of course, the only reason it leaked, well, it didn't leak out at all. It came out when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. But had those bombs not been dropped, that secret, I suspect, would have been kept, because when we talk about secrets that come out, what we don't see is the tip of, that's the tip of the iceberg. What we don't see is the vast majority of the iceberg, which is still under the water. The military and government successfully keep secrets from the public and from adversaries all the time.
Mm-hmm. I would like to go back to the assumption that let's suppose these cases are aliens, right? Let's suppose that. My first question would be like, why is there such a bad rap about the possibility that we could be visited by aliens? Because at the end of the day, you think about it, at some point we will be able to go in the universe and try to explore other planets. Why is there such a bad rap? Why people disbelieve this possibility so much? What do you think?
I think part of it has to do with pop culture and science fiction. The subject, when you say words like UFO and alien, you're far more likely to think of I don't know, 50s sci-fi movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still and the flying saucer landing close to the White House and things like that. You're far more likely to think of that than you are to think about astrobiology and things like that. And yet that shouldn't be the case. We should take a very neutral view on this. And it's interesting. There's nothing, I don't really like the word paranormal, but there's nothing inherently paranormal about the idea that life might have arisen elsewhere in the universe and might be visiting us, because it doesn't really need, any new laws of physics or chemistry or anything like that. Now, you could say, well, we don't have viable interstellar travel, and that's true, but we've devised probes that in a few tens of thousands of years will reach the nearest stars. And if a civilization emerged, 100 million years ahead of us and had built similar probes like the Voyager probes and the Pioneer probes with no more technology than we currently possess, then those probes could be here already. So it doesn't violate any laws of physics to say that this would happen.
What do you think it would be more scary, that we are alone in the universe or that we are not alone? What do you think it would be more scary?
Not alone, because I think then it would be terrifying and empty, and you would begin to think, well, why has it happened here and nowhere else? And as I say, everything that we know about the laws of physics, they seem to be constant in the observable universe, and all these, I know that gravity is a factor, but if you throw together the different, elements in the different combinations, you will, the formulas are always the same. The isotopic ratios may be different, but the formulas are the same. And mathematics too, pi is going to be pi everywhere in the universe, and so with these laws seemingly being the same, I think it is just a case of if you roll the dice enough times, you should find other life out there. And I think being alone would be very sad and scary, but interacting, hopefully, on a sort of positive, communicative basis with other civilizations would be fascinating. I mean, think of all the things we could learn from a civilization just 100 years ahead of us, just 10 years, 50 years ahead. But as I say, with the kind of timescales of the universe in mind, that we're nearly 14 billion years old. Imagine a civilization with a billion-year head start on us, or a few hundred million. What could they teach us? That would be fascinating.
Indeed.
Yeah, hopefully that they will be still alive. It's like, as we can see, our civilization has some tendencies of self-destruction. Hopefully this won't happen. But I watched one of your interviews before, and there was one interesting point that you mentioned about that potentially if there are some aliens visiting us, they don't really want to be seen. So maybe they are more like a researchers. They're actually checking what's happening on Earth, and the same way as we do with, different animals, that we observe them and see how they live. That's also a possibility, right?
Yes. Now, I always smile when I talk about this, because it's impossible not to end up using the phrase prime directive and talk about Star Trek. But it is possible to draw that parallel between anthropology, but looking at without interacting with people, and wildlife documentaries, where obviously if you stick a camera in the middle of a pride of lions, they're going to be looking at it and swiping at the lens and wondering. But if you hide it so that they're completely unaware, then you will see those animals in their natural environment and behaving as they behave. And yeah, this analogy could be applied to interstellar travel and extraterrestrial visitation. And you might think, and I think it's an interesting argument, that to really advanced civilizations, newly emerging civilizations like humanity, might be very interesting. I mean, I never like to say there comes a time when we'll have figured everything out, because I think that sounds arrogant, but it's possible. I mean, if you look at the list of major unsolved problems in physics, in computer science, in mathematics, and things like that, I think it's possible to think that an advanced civilization would have worked its way through a lot of that, and therefore would be interested in the more abstract things, the not so much high technology, but as I say, emerging civilizations, different political systems, different ways of organizing societies, different religions and other beliefs, all those sorts of things.
Is it true that many of these UAPs phenomena are taking place near common places like nuclear power stations or things like that, or am I wrong in this?
You're right, but there is a debate going on about how meaningful it is, because there are some people who think that this might just be collection bias, in that the areas around nuclear facilities and military bases more generally are more heavily monitored by cameras and radar systems, and they tend to have no-fly zones and a lot of sensor arrays. So those, if an area is more heavily surveilled, you should automatically pick up more targets just because you're looking more. So it's almost a philosophical argument, but yeah, of course it can be tested. So So the US government is currently working to refine that. So that's one very interesting point. Let me just go back actually and make a final point about that prime directive argument. I guess the point about the prime directive is that the moment you do land on the White House lawn and you start communicating and you start trading, these newly emerging civilizations, i.e. us, they lose their uniqueness. And therefore, in one sense, they lose their interest because we simply end up adopting, whether it's forced on us or whether it's a willing process. But eventually, there's a sort of cross-cultural contamination. So it's now like you see, I was talking about this the other day. If you look at a photograph of world leaders taken 100 years ago, you can see a lot of them in their wonderful national costumes, and it really shows the differences between peoples of the world. Now everyone, when you take these sorts of pictures at the United Nations or the G8 or whatever it is, everyone's just wearing a suit. Gone are the days where some of the African and the Asian and people are in some of these wonderful kind of very different costumes. So you get this sort of homogenization. And I think, in a sense, we lose something. And, you see it now. You go all around the world and everyone's just going to be wearing a T-shirt with the name of a well-known soccer team on it. And that might be, I'm kind of exaggerating, but maybe not. That might be the model for a post-contact world, that we're going to lose that uniqueness, and we're going to end up, wearing those same T-shirts and flip-flops and whatever it is.
Socks with flip-flops.
Socks.
No, but that's actually interesting conversation. Because now, as we can see, because of the communication internet, there are so many kind of trends and canons of beauty even that people share, almost, especially in the Western world. Like, I wonder, maybe people one day will literally start looking very similar because they will be just aiming for this unified, perfect sort of biological state and look. But I have another question that kind of makes me wonder, what is the correlation between religion and believing in UFOs, and that we might have some neighbors in the planets out there?
It's a very interesting and complex question. I don't profess to have an answer to it. I think some people have looked at it and have said that there is a kind of, maybe, I think we've heard the phrase the God gene, and that there's a predisposition in some personality types to maybe be religious, and some people have drawn that parallel and said that belief in extraterrestrials is like, or has some similarities with religious belief. And then you get some areas of it that are literally a crossover. So, for example, you have ancient astronaut theory, which says that we were visited by extraterrestrials in our past, and our ancestors misperceived these extraterrestrials as gods and worshipped them and built monuments in honor of them. So it's a very complex area with a lot of crossover. I think there's a separate but related question about what the effect would be on religious belief if we did find out that we're not alone in the universe. And that's a very complex and disputed question itself, because some theologians say that they would be fine with it. The Catholic Church has already issued a number of statements about this, and they've funded some scientific and theological and crossover symposia into this, because they want to look at it. And they've in 2008, the then director of the Vatican's observatory said that there was no doctrinal objection to the existence of extraterrestrial life. And his quote was, "Because man may place no creative limits upon God." So some religions and some individual theologians and scholars have given some thought to this. Now, there are some other people who dispute that and say that religions, even those religions that have given this some thought and are saying positive things about it, would actually, some atheists and secular scholars in particular say that religions they're just talking the talk here, and that if this actually happened, the whole thing would collapse, or at least it would be a very profound challenge to them. I think the answer is we simply don't know. There are so many variables that we couldn't say. What if we encountered an advanced civilization that regarded religion as primitive superstition? What if, on the other hand, we encountered a number of advanced civilizations who had a very intricate religion, but it looked very different to any of our religions? It was a god and a religion built around a god that we don't recognize. Or what if we find that there are billions of other civilizations out there, some of which have religion, some of which have no religion. And so there are a lot of questions to grapple with, but it's one of the big and interesting unknowns.
Mm-hmm. What is clear is that if we were contacted by another civilization, the world would be upside down. So would you like to live those times? Or because I would be scared to live those times, to be honest. I'm not sure. Another civilization contacting us, I mean, what's the guarantee that they come in peace? What's the guarantee that it's going to be a good deal for us?
Yeah, and I mentioned the variables. And again, I'm only half joking when I say if you use science fiction as a good indicator of the spectrum here, imagine the difference between contacting ET and being, visited by the aliens that you see in Independence Day or War of the Worlds. I mean, so it's very difficult to make predictions. I think the only prediction you could make with confidence is that, yes, as you say, every aspect of our world would be impacted in some way, whether it's politics, religion, science, technology. But even within that, there are variables in how this contact might take place. So on the one hand, what if we picked up a signal via a radio telescope, but from a civilization we may never meet face to face? That's very different from, say, discovering a probe in our solar system, which some astrophysicists like Professor Avi Loeb at Harvard beginning to think about. And that's very different from actually someone landing on the White House lawn or showing up in orbit and starting a conversation.
Yeah.
So, on balance, yes, I would like to live in those times because I think it would be interesting and I think it would be fascinating. And maybe there's nothing we could do if we did face a real life war of the world. So I say bring it on and let's just hope that it's benevolent or at least neutral.
Yeah.
You mentioned Avi before. We interviewed him some months ago, and he talked to us about his project that he's planning to develop a technology to basically send microchips to other planets to kind of, take images, videos, pictures. Maybe from the technical point of view, I'm messing up the information, but basically develop a technology that uses the energy of the sun to travel at a certain percentage of speed light. So maybe if we are not being contacted by aliens right now, maybe we are the first ones to make the contact, right? Eventually. So do you think it would be better for us to be the first ones?
It might be. There's a very famous solution to the Fermi Paradox. The Fermi Paradox said that if other civilizations develop as easily as some people think should be the case, where is everybody? Because we should have seen evidence of them now, and I mean definitive evidence, major changes being made to the universe, whether that's something like Dyson spheres or other techno-signatures or something even bigger. And the solution, or one of the solutions to the Fermi Paradox is what is called the first up, last out theory, which does say that we are the very first civilization to have emerged, and that therefore we will be the ones to colonize the universe, and we will be last to leave the stage. There would be, maybe if you like the idea of human immortality, that's quite good. But if you like the idea of finding a universe full of different life, maybe it's not so good. But yeah, it's a possibility that some scientists are thinking about. And again, it's very interesting to think. I mentioned earlier 14 billion years old. It sounds like a long time, of course. But if you listen to economist Robin Hanson talk about his model of so-called grabby aliens, his point is that we are very early in the universe. And that's one of those fascinating counterintuitive points. So maybe first up, last out is something to think about.
Maybe there are other two explanations. Maybe could it be that maybe civilizations are popping up in the universe all the time, but they reach certain level of advance that they kind of implode, the civilization implode, and they destroy themselves? Or maybe is it that there are a lot of signals in the universe, but we don't have the technology to capture those? Because I think we have the SETI project, we now have the James Webb telescope, but we might be looking at the wrong kind of signals, or maybe wrong spectrum. Forget about my technical knowledge, but
no, you're quite right. And I've spoken to a number of SETI scientists about this, and they say, look, we've only really just started to look. We've only scratched the surface. Even the next generation radio telescope, the Square Kilometre Array, will only still be able to search the tiny little corner of the Milky Way galaxy that we live in. And so we've only just started this search. So that may be one factor, but you're right. The longevity of a civilization was something that Frank Drake talked about in his famous Drake equation. And he said, civilizations may only be communicable and therefore on the air, so to speak, for a very small window in time before something does wipe them out, whether that something is a nuclear war, whether that something is artificial intelligence that then decides humanity is a threat, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's the impact of a comet or an asteroid. There's so many different things. That's why I agree with Elon Musk. At the moment, we have all our eggs in one basket when it comes to humanity, and people like Elon Musk and Avi Loeb take that wider perspective that if humanity is to survive, we need to get a moon base, we need to go to Mars, but ultimately we need viable interstellar travel to get away from this sun. I mean, life on Earth will probably be impossible within a billion years from now, and the sun will expand, and probably, we could maybe go to some of the outer planets, but still, that's still all our eggs in one basket in terms of one solar system. Ultimately, we'll need to spread out.
That's true. I wonder if humans are a good design, if we are gonna be able to also adapt. Well, this is speculation. Well, 'cause I don't know how people feel like leaving the planets, and I mean, there's a lot of people that are kind of wondering right now whether they would go or not. I think you said you would go. I'm not sure. Maybe for exploration, but yeah.
Both physically and mentally, we're not really equipped for space travel, whether it's our comparatively short lifespans, whether it's our vulnerability to things like gamma ray bursts that we would encounter out in space. There's a whole number of things, which of course is why a lot of people are talking about transhumanism and maybe merging humanity with machines and artificial intelligence somehow.
I think that's our best bet, to be honest, because if you want to spread around the universe, like, you have to get rid of your body shape, right?
The weak parts.
Yes, but of course, whether that is ever actually going to be possible, and even if it is, whether that then means that humanity as we think of it won't exist anything else anymore. It will have evolved into something else, but I guess that's always the way of the world, and maybe it's the way of the universe too. Who knows?
I actually would like to know a little bit. I haven't watched the show, but I would like to learn more about ancient aliens, because I heard you are a part of the show. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yes, Ancient Aliens has now run for, I think it's 19 seasons. I mean, it started as something like a 2-hour special in 2009. And nobody thought that it would have the enduring appeal that it has had. But I think it doesn't seek to tell people, look, this is what happened, but it asks the question. And you hear it in the voiceover at the beginning of the show. Could it be? And I mentioned earlier ancient astronaut theory. Ancient astronaut theory, as I say, suggests that to less technologically advanced people, interstellar visitation would be perceived as visits from the gods. So the idea is that that's what happened in our past. And maybe if humanity does develop interstellar travel, and whether it's our probes landing somewhere, or maybe one day us, human beings ourselves, and we encounter a less technologically advanced civilization, maybe we'll be worshipped as gods. Who knows? So Ancient Aliens, the TV series, asks those questions. And it says, were some of these ancient monuments and sacred sites built to honor gods who were actually visiting aliens? Now, I'm not really an ancient astronaut theory myself. When I'm on the show, I'm talking more about the modern stories, because in the last few seasons, Ancient Aliens they'll still have stories about the pyramids and Humapunku and all these amazing sites and monuments and things. But they've increasingly started looking at the US Navy videos, what's going on in Congress, the modern UFO phenomenon. So I'm on the show really concentrating on the government and the military side of this. But people are fascinated by the ancient part of it too. And they're wondering, is there something that links the ancient to the modern? And I think increasingly Ancient Aliens is exploring that. And the show just spawned a spin-off, which is Ancient Aliens Live, which is a 90-minute stage show that tours all around the US, featuring a number of the people from the show. So it's hugely, hugely popular. And I moderate those live events. So people are passionate about it. And as I say, it's not seeking to tell people this is what happened, but it's seeking to make people think, might there be things about our past that we've got wrong?
I have to admit I've watched Ancient Aliens, and I've watched on many other TV shows, especially when I was when I was younger. But I want to play devil's advocate a little bit with these TV shows. Don't you think that they lack a little bit of more skepticism in there? Like they kind of show, well, this is the theory, this is all the facts that support this theory, but we don't talk much about the counter argument. Do you think so?
Well, you know, it's not every TV program has to show both sides.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't disagree with you. Ancient Aliens is a program for believers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But having said that, you know, I think it is pitched at some of the people maybe in the middle who haven't thought about it, and just, as I say, could it be? But yeah, it's never going to win over the skeptic, sure. Unlike, you know, a documentary that says, well, here's one side of the argument and here's the other. But Ancient Aliens doesn't pretend to be that kind of show. It's like, look, could it
Fair
be?
enough. Okay. Okay. So I think we're reaching to the end of the conversation. As usual, we ask our guests like a couple of questions. We always ask the kind of same question. So do you want to go ahead?
Well, first one is, what is one lesson that you learned the hard way?
I think it's that you've got to see for yourself. So, for example, when I was at the Ministry of Defense and we were doing some studies into things that had happened in Iraq, you can read all the documents you want, but ultimately we had to go there and see for ourselves.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, you were involved in those times, right? In the Iraq war, right?
Never in a. I was, as I say, I was never in the military. I was a civilian, but I went out there once in 2003, once in 2004 to do a couple of short studies. And you have to go out there, get your boots on the ground, and get that ground truth.
Yeah, makes sense. And the last question is, what's the life lesson? I mean, what's the advice, the life advice that you would give to the listeners if you had to choose one?
Read. I think there's so much fascinating knowledge out there. Spend less time on your smartphone arguing with strangers and looking at cute videos of cats, and read. The sum total of human knowledge is out there. It's accessible in libraries, in books, online too. Read.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a last question. Tell us what you're working on at the moment, or like, do you have any passions you are pursuing, or any projects you're working on?
Well, I'm continuing with Ancient Aliens Live, and we're taking it to more and more cities around the United States. Also, this ties in with what we were talking about earlier. I created and host a TV show called After Contact, which says, forget all the debates about aliens. If it's true, what happens next? And we get into some of the areas that we've talked about, and some we didn't have time to talk about: politics, religion, science, technology, the economy, much more besides. So After Contact, that's my passion project right now.
That sounds awesome.
That sounds
I need
promising.
to catch up on that as well.
We need to watch it. Perfect.
Great.
So, well, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and it's a very interesting subject. I've always been really interested in UFOs, UAPs, and, you know, the possibility that, you know, we are being contacted by aliens. But if not, it's also interesting to know that, you know, there's some unexplainable phenomena that needs to, you know, that is getting attention at the moment. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you. So thank you. And we hope we can host you in the future again to keep talking about this.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye now.
Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up. So